You should know that the number one reason businesses fail, people say it's cash flow, it's partnership issues. I've invested in over 100 businesses. It's always partnership issues. If you don't get along with the people that you start this company with, that's what's going to destroy it.
What are some of the things you look for in a great company?
Two things make a company successful. It's whether they're solving a real problem, and secondly, who the other investors are.
Welcome to Challenger X. I'm Jerome Dwight, entrepreneur, investor, and business leader. Today's guest is Sanjay Singhal, most famously known for selling audiobooks.com for $56 million. Together, we talked about overcoming failure, confronting mental health, exploring psychedelics, and Sanjay's new rules for business. I can't wait for you to listen to this one. Let's go. Sanjay, you've had such an interesting story. You have quite a rise through starting out as a writer, then building audiobooks.com, very public exit, a lot of challenges around the way. So I'd love to get into it with you, but just tell me a little bit about your early days, your journey. How did you get into the business world and go from there?
So my father was an entrepreneur. He came to the country to do his PhD in physics at the University of New Brunswick. And then for a variety of reasons, and he's got to write his own book, but he wasn't able to fulfill that. He got his PhD and then got into real estate development. Like he finished our basement of the house and then he rented that out, and eventually he got into building apartment buildings and had a number of apartment buildings. That was my childhood. And I always thought, someday I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But I went through all the normal mechanics of getting an education, getting a graduate degree, getting a Fortune 500 job, cubicle, and rising that way. But after I got my business degree from Cornell University, I thought, okay, this is the time. I took a course in entrepreneurship. I wrote a business plan for this idea of a home video delivery service. And my business school professor said, don't do it. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. This is going to be so exciting. And I did it, and it was a disaster. And I learned a ton. And then I started my next company, and I didn't learn anything from the first business, and I made a whole new set of mistakes, and this time went bankrupt, and then decided I'm never going to start a business again. And then I finally started a business that actually made money. So
yeah, it's always fascinating. On this show, we talk to challengers who have overcome numerous obstacles in their path, but somehow they keep going, and clearly you've managed to do that. Just in the early years, what were some of the lessons you learned from your upbringing that you still put into practice now?
Wow, okay. So I talk a lot about my parents' influence on me growing up, and I talk about the specific lessons that my dad taught me, but my mom's the one who created the bubble of safety around which, I could grow up, feel loved and welcomed at home, and then free to try and excel academically, right? So, but the funny thing is, so my parents, though, they had all these lessons from back in India, and some of them really applied here, and some of them really didn't, right? Like every significant gamble I've taken entrepreneurially, my father said, don't do it, right? And the reason, I mean, he was supportive emotionally, but intellectually it was like, don't do it. This is not how you make money. This is not how, at one point I had a sales job that was making $250,000 a year for Cisco, and I quit it to make $60,000 and get a chunk of equity in this telecom startup. He said, you're insane. Why would you do this? And then finally was like, okay, fine, go ahead and do it, but don't tell your mother. So they have all these lessons, and such valuable lessons, like friends that you make quickly, you're going to lose quickly. I didn't appreciate that as much at the time, but I've grown to realize that, oh my God, that's such a true statement. Don't loan money to friends unless you're prepared to say goodbye to the friendship. And there's all of these lessons that I kind of outline in my book, and they gradually piled up to create a character, I guess. Yeah. But the biggest challenge I had to overcome was myself. Like I was the problem. At both of my ventures that failed, I was the problem. And it wasn't until I accepted that I was the problem, went to see a psychiatrist, got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, then the actual journey began.
Wow. That's quite an insightful statement, because a lot of us founders, CEOs, we always think we're right. We're not the problem. It's everyone around us. So I'd love to unpack how you came to that point where you said, maybe it's me. Talk us through it, because I think a lot of young entrepreneurs, leaders need to hear someone like you who's obviously very successful, but have had to come to some of those difficult realizations.
So I'll tell you two things that happened. Right? One was the moment there was actually a mutiny at my office. So this is the second business, the one that was going to be $1 billion idea, a mobile device that could send and receive email years before the BlackBerry came out. We had a product, we had customers, we had everything, but one day I walked into my office and I had 9 staff there, and somebody came up and closed the door behind me, locked the door, and said, okay, you're going to have to sit here and listen to us. And all 9 of them turned their chairs around and said, this is an intervention, right? And I was like, okay, you 4 are fired right now, okay, and you 3 go back and do your job. And so like they tried to stage an intervention, but I was like, no, not gonna happen. Like a week later, I was in the office again, smaller group of staff. Somebody comes up to me and says, Sanjay, there's somebody here to see you. They say they're with the police. And it was a detective from San Diego Police. And they actually took me, put me in cuffs, and walked me out to a squad car and took me downtown, like literally took me downtown. Because I'd been writing checks for my business, and I didn't know that they were going to bounce, but I wasn't particularly keeping track of the amount of money in my bag. And so they had me for kiting checks. And eventually, I mean, they really just wanted to scare me. One of the people I'd written a bad check to wanted to put a fear into me, and he had a friend in the police department. But those are examples of things that at the time, it was like, everybody's out to get me. But then one day I woke up, and instead of being manic in the bipolar phase, I was depressed. And when you're depressed, you have a lot of time to think.
Right.
And I sat down and I thought about all of the stupid things I had done. And it was inescapable. I was the problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow, and talk about having some loyal team members around you who felt the courage to help you really through that. Fantastic story. I want to get into audiobooks.com. You started in a very sort of entry-level role in there, and over time became the shareholder or owner, and then this wonderful exit. So maybe talk us through how that journey happened.
There were a lot of really interesting aspects to that story. But I mean, so the way it started, my entry-level job was, when the company started, I had made a little bit of money in this telecom startup I worked at. And so I was able to invest $100,000 in the business, and the other co-founders put in some money. So, but I was the largest shareholder. I owned 40% of the company. But I wasn't working there. I was working at this other company. And then about a year after the company launched, I wasn't having fun at this other company. Actually, sorry, I wasn't having fun. I got fired, right? So I thought, okay, now I need a new job. And so I went to the CEO of audiobooks and said, hey, I'm willing to take a really low salary. Can I come in and do something? He said, well, we need somebody to run customer service. Great, fire me up. So I was Sanjay, the customer service rep, and Bob, who was his manager, right? People say, I want to talk to your manager. I'd be like, how y'all doing, or something. It was that small a company that we had to have these fake personalities. And then gradually grew and grew. From the beginning, I was chairman of the board from my shareholding. And then, oh my God, like so many turns in that path. And at one point, the CEO and I, who had started out as close friends, came to loggerheads. We were suing each other. He had me fired from that job. And eventually I left, started another company. That company took off. I came back and bought audiobooks from him. And then eventually bought out other partners, became the sole shareholder. And that's when the company took off.
Right.
That was, exciting.
Wow, incredible story. And I think you publicly talk about how much you exited for.
This is one of these things, okay?
Yeah.
So people don't talk about this. I don't understand why
Right.
people don't talk about it. Just tell them the damn number,
Yeah.
right? It's not like, so I say I sold my company for $56 million. That's not how much money I got in my bank account, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other calculations that go on after that. But people know I live in a nice house. They don't,
Yeah.
does it matter, right? So just tell the number, because it's useful for other entrepreneurs to know. Most companies exit around $30 million, right? But I talk to people all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, if I can't get $1 billion exit, I don't know why I'm bothering doing this. It's like, most companies exit for 30 million. You should know that kind of data.
Right.
You should know that the number one reason businesses fail, people say it's cash flow, it's partnership issues. I've invested in over 100 businesses. It's always partnership issues, right? If you don't get along with the people that you start this company with,
Yeah.
that's what's going to destroy it.
And how do you manage those relationships? I have a co-founder at Boomerang, and we've been friends for 2 decades. I always count myself fortunate to be in a relationship like that. How do you manage the inevitable tensions that come up with partners and learn to see the other side? Something I'm still learning to do.
I mean, I want to ask you if there's a magic solution to this. Being friends beforehand helps. And if you've known somebody for more than 5 years, guaranteed the relationship's gone through some kind of ups and downs, right? So you've been able to demonstrate some kind of resilience in managing tension. I've had really great partners and I've had really terrible partners. And honestly, I think, there's a lesson I've learned about picking partners, okay? Actually, and it's the same lesson as picking employees. Actually, the same lesson as picking a life partner, right? Which is, it's almost impossible to get good at filtering on the uptake. But you can get really, really good at getting rid of people once you know they're bad. And a lot of people are afraid to do that, right? So for me, my first marriage, it was a problem from day one, and neither one of us had the guts to actually pull the trigger on a divorce. We were married for 6 years and we didn't have to be, right? So now what I tell everybody is, if your partner seems dishonest, if your business partner, if you hire somebody and they surprise you more often negatively than positively, just get rid of them. What's the harm? Let them go find a job that they're going to be good at.
Yeah.
Get good at firing, because nobody is better than 50%
Right.
at hiring.
When you look back at particularly the audiobooks.com journey, this show is about challengers who deal with enormous adversity and somehow keep coming back. Right? Can you walk us through a few of those, inflection points where you said, these are some very difficult times. I don't know if I want to keep going here.
Yeah. So here's something about being a challenger that surprised me. I thought that the big companies, the Amazons of the world, right, who was our direct competitor because they owned Audible, I thought that they were just smarter. I thought all these people making $500,000 a year sitting in oak-covered boardrooms, that they were just smarter, they knew more, they were able to make decisions better. And what I discovered was they really, really aren't. We were one step ahead of Amazon every single time we launched a new product. It's like we were more nimble. We thought of more creative ideas. We were willing to take bigger risks. And they were constantly playing catch up. So the message I would give to every challenger is you are smarter than the big guys. You're able to take bigger risks than the big guys, and you can stay ahead of them through your own brain power, right? They don't have some magical secret. What they have is capital, right? And sometimes that capital can drown you, right? At one point, we thought Netflix was going to sue us, and we had a bunch of investors bail out. And my response was, I met the head of operations for Netflix at a conference once. He seemed to like when people use the Netflix model in other businesses. Right. So I'm not actually going to be afraid of this. You can't live your life in fear. If they sued us, then we would have been out of business. But it didn't happen.
That's fantastic. You've invested in, 100 plus companies. Obviously have a real knack for identifying companies, investing early stage and nurturing them. What are some of the things you look for in a great company? Is it the leadership team? Is it the business model? What are the key ingredients you're looking for when you're looking for the next company you want to invest in?
Okay, so the common advice is you're investing in the people. Okay, I'm going to say that's bullshit. Because yes, after the fact, you can look back and say, oh man, those people, they were great. They took this company through adversity and thick and thin. But you can only tell that after the fact. Right. So when I make investments, I always write down on my Excel spreadsheet, what was the reason I made this investment? Was it because of the CEO? Was it because of the product? Was it because of the trust of the person who referred me the deal? And two things make a company successful. It's whether they're solving a real problem, okay? And secondly, who the other investors are, right? Because in the world I live in, of venture capital and private equity investment, the ability to raise more downstream capital is what will make you successful. If you don't have that ability, you're not going to be. And if your co-investor is Y Combinator or Sequoia Capital or Kleiner Perkins, then you're going to do great. But I, as an individual, I can't tell if this company is going to do well. But they have to solve a real problem, right? With audiobooks, for us, it was like, they were just stupid expensive, right? There was a real problem there. We had a real solution for it. Probably the best single small investment I made was $25,000 into this Indian company that was making credit card processing more reliable in India, okay? I've been to India many times, and it was like, credit cards, nightmare, right? And when I heard what they were doing, it's like, okay, this isn't sexy, but it's solving a real problem. I know nothing about the team, but I know it's a real problem. Sure enough, $25,000 turned into $1 million
Fabulous.
On that one in 3 years too. Like it was like,
Yeah.
skyrocket.
What are the things you look for in leaders, in your leadership team?
Oh my gosh, that's a horrible question to ask me. So let me tell you my success story first, okay? Which is the leadership team I put in place at audiobooks.com. I hired one guy, the head of marketing was folding pants at Club Monaco when I hired him, okay? The guy who was CEO by the time I left, he was a bartender that was out of work, and we hired him, paid him minimum wage to replace a broken robot arm on a CD burning computer that we had. So he would just physically take the CDs from one place to another, right? This guy grew to be the CEO of that company. He's made millions through his stock options and equity grants. That entire team that I hired in 2003, 2004, 2005, when we started the company, are still in place today.
Wow.
8 years after I sold the company. Because they all like each other, because I believed what I think Netflix says, what Salesforce says, CEOs say, which is that culture trumps strategy, right? And I always wanted to have a place where everybody got along. We had our core values. We really believed in the core values and lived to them, and they weren't complicated. It was experiment, do what you say you're going to do, and have a real community. And we had tests, like everything was about the culture, the culture, the culture. And then the strategy dropped out of the culture, right? So all I can say is it's not that I picked great leaders, right? This environment created great leaders.
Yeah, so creating the environment for leadership to blossom. You're an interesting individual because you, like many of the people we have on the show, are always pushing the boundaries, right? You've gone from industry to industry, and now you are a spokesperson for psychedelics. So I want to dig into that and the role it plays in healthcare. So tell me how you got into that, and your experience with that.
Sure. So I have bipolar disorder myself, treated very well with a drug called lamotrigine that I got put on 25 years ago now. My daughter, unfortunately, suffers from anorexia. And anorexia has got the highest mortality rate of any mental disorder, and there's no treatment for it. So I heard a psychedelic researcher say during a conference that he thought psilocybin and therapy might combine together to be a treatment for anorexia. And that was the trigger. My daughter and I flew to London, England to meet with this fellow, Robin Carhart Harris, heard about his projects and decided to write $1 million check to fund his new research institute at Imperial University or Imperial College. And then I started reading more and more and more. And through the research I did into psychedelics to fund that new project, we got access to a bunch of the people in Canada, Toronto, who were underground already treating people using psychedelics for a variety of things. So my daughter and I decided to go with her on these journeys, trying psychedelics, mostly for emotional support for her. But then I discovered that, oh my God, psychedelics are useful for all kinds of things. Like, they just open up your mind. They let you investigate childhood trauma. They let you debug aspects of your personality, as long as you know the dose you're taking and you're with a guide who knows what they're doing. Like, those are critical. The number of people I've met over the years who say, oh my God, I'm never going to do mushrooms again because I had this horrible experience. And I always say, how much did you take? And the answer is always, I don't know. Right. Or I took a handful. It's like, you're insane. Who would take a drug and just take a handful? So it was, I gradually experienced more and more different environments, altered consciousness states on psychedelics, and then gradually came to discover a new type of therapy called internal family systems that has actually dramatically changed my life. Psychedelics were like softening me up, right? But internal family systems is something that Can I talk about it?
Yes,
Describe what it is?
absolutely, yeah.
So the idea is that the voice in your head isn't one person. Like you're not one person. There's actually a bunch of people inside you. Call them your inner child. Call them, they manifest through the chakras. And this sounds incredibly hokey, right? When I describe it to people, but I could walk you through an exercise that will convince you of the reality that you're actually composed of multiple personalities. And what happens is, so I was able to, for example, using the techniques that are in this book called No Bad Parts by Dick Schwartz, I was able to look at a glass of alcohol, ask myself, why do I want that glass? And have a voice come from inside me that I was trained then to listen to, that the voice came back and said, because you're boring. I said, well, I'm not boring. How old do you think I am? And you're 12 years old, you stay in your room all the time, you're just reading, you don't have any friends, you need to start drinking, right? It's like, this is fascinating. I was me with my eyes closed at a bar, trying to figure out why I drink. And then, by the end of that conversation with this part of me, I opened my eyes and I didn't want to drink anymore. And I stopped drinking cold for a year. It wasn't hard. I just didn't want to drink anymore. Because I told that part of me, hey, I'm 55. You don't need to tell me when to drink. I'll decide.
Right.
You go do something else. So this path of psychedelics and mental health in general, like, wow, everybody needs to open their minds or have their minds opened and have a little bit more self-awareness. I think that helps a lot.
I think you've been able to integrate a lot of these different facets of yourself, which is terrific, because not a lot of certainly the business community talks about the whole human being. Do you practice any kind of spirituality as part of your daily walk?
So if myself from 10 years ago saw myself now, he'd think, oh my God, he's gone off the rails, complete crazy person, because now I talk about spirituality, I journal, I meditate, I do yoga. I mean, these are things that were completely off the menu 10 years ago, but now I realize the value of them, and I'm much more in tune with myself. If you ask other people, they'll say Sanjay's just a calmer, nicer person than he was back then. I know my priorities. My priorities, absolute rock solid, it's family, right? And once we get outside of family, then it'll be friends. When we get outside of friends, it's going to be, at the very top is taking care of myself, right, physically and mentally, then family, then friends, and then it's business, right? And there's a time in everybody's life, especially when you're younger, when you're a challenger, when you can't necessarily afford to have that set of priorities. Right. You need to create financial security for yourself. You need to work some crazy hours, focus on that, get it done, but understand. And here's, oh my God, I wish I could go back and have a talk with myself from 8 years ago when I made all the money. There comes a time when you switch from playing offense to playing defense. You need to make a crisp mental decision that I'm no longer playing offense. And then it's a different game, and it's all different lessons. You need to read different books and talk to different people, and I didn't do it. And so I made all that money, and then I lost $20 million over the course of the following 8 years, just doing dumbass shit that was completely avoidable.
Right.
But I've come to accept, through my spiritual journey, I've come to accept that the loss is part of the gain. So it's not that I went there and then this is the end.
Right.
It's my whole life has been like this.
Yeah, that's great context for a lot of the young entrepreneurs. I think we're all playing offense, and a lot of us are burning out, right? And so knowing when to pull back, I think, is important. It's clearly Sanjay 2.0 has evolved. We love hearing those stories. So what else is on the menu? I know you've got venture now in restauranting, and many of my team have already been to your restaurant and love the place. So we want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, so what happened was, after I sold my company, I got into venture capital. I didn't like that for, mostly I didn't want to be responsible for other people's money. That was the core problem. But the fund has done extremely well, 500 Startups Canada. And I got out of it very quickly and was sitting on a pile of cash, didn't know what to do with myself, and I thought, I want to open a bar, right? Like, who doesn't want to open a bar? Right. So I opened a bar. And that bar, Coffee Oyster Champagne in downtown Toronto, has been a phenomenal success from day one. It's a speakeasy. You have to go in and ask for the champagne tour, and everybody's blown away when they have that experience. Right. Like, there's nothing else like it in Canada. Then I made the mistake of thinking I knew what I was doing, and I didn't. I got lucky and opened a restaurant called Marked, which got rave reviews, was always busy, but never made money. And then later got into problems with my business partner, and he left, and I was left to run. He was the operating partner, and I was now left to run a restaurant and a bar. Love the bar. I go there all the time. Restaurant, so now I don't want a restaurant, but I want a nightclub. I like, okay, if I had a free evening and I could do anything I wanted, right? Anything I wanted, I would say, I want to take 10 of my friends and go to a rave or go to a nightclub, and just like that's my thing, right? So the ability to create that environment was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Right.
So.
What a fantastic, way to get into business with on a venture that you like, right? You want to experience yourself. But I am fascinated by the fact that you can move through all these dimensions seamlessly. How do you find the mental agility to go in and work across these lanes?
So, first of all, we all have that mental agility. It's not agility so much as it is understanding that underlying everything else that you do, that I do as business people, it's the same lessons, right? It's the absolute same things. Things like trusting people, being able to delegate, applies everywhere. I was misled by my business partner to think that running restaurants was somehow a form of complicated that was different from audiobooks, right? I mean, imagine the different disparity. There's 1,000 moving pieces in a restaurant. But in audiobooks, you're dealing with much, much bigger stakes. But what I realized at the end of the day, no, the lessons are the same, right? You surround yourself with good people. That is absolutely the first thing you do in any endeavor. Surround yourself with good people. Your job is just to make sure they can do their jobs, right? And then beyond that, it's experiment all the time. Like, out of 100 things that I try, 5 of them will work, right? And I have to not feel bad about the 95 that don't work. I'll tell you something that happened at my speakeasy, right? Took us a year to figure out how to get profit. It was always busy, but it took us a year to get to profitability. What we discovered was we had this little back room where we would have a magician, and we would take our best customers and we would take them back there and say, hey, look, on top of your meal, you get to have this cool magic show. Oh, we love it, right? And then, so one day somebody said, why don't we charge for that? It's like, a charge for entertainment in a restaurant? That seems weird, right? So we put it on the menu. We called it, Isabel's our fake owner of the place. We called it Isabel's Bubbles on the menu, and if you pay $30 for a $2 glass of Prosecco, you also get a ticket to enter this mysterious back room that's behind a sliding door, and you get to go see a cabaret performance or a magic show or a mentalist. That now accounts for 20% of all of our profits, right? But that was just one of, and I could go on and on about all the dumb things we tried that didn't work, but you just have to keep trying.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of the really brilliant innovators that I talk to, they have a little bit of an instinct and they actually act on it, whereas most people, have those ideas but don't act on it. How do you play off your instinct, but it feels like you actually take action?
Okay, so I have a bias to action, but on the instinct thing, I got to tell you, I have horrible instincts. I've measured whether I'm good at hiring people. I'm terrible at hiring people, but I'm great at firing them. At new ideas, okay, the original idea for audiobooks, the guy came to me, the person who became my partner, and he said, we're going to take audiobooks, we're going to package them up, and we're going to mail them out to people. $20 a month, unlimited, right? That's the exact model that Netflix used at the time, right? I said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. Nobody's going to go for that. He said, have you heard of a company called Netflix? I go, nope, who's that? And he gives me a press release across the table, and he says, 400,000 customers, right? This is what they do. I go, huh, okay. So my instincts on that were completely wrong. But what I've learned over many, many years is just run the experiment. What's the cheapest, quickest experiment you can run to prove whether or not this idea is going to work? Right. So for example, when we hire people, we have them actually do the job. When we hire customer service people, we put them in a room, we pretend that everybody else has gone out for lunch, and we have them answer an angry phone call from a customer with no training whatsoever. People can do that, right? People, you might think it's too hard of a test. No, some people excel at it. They're great. So it's what's the smallest, cheapest experiment you can do that substitutes for your instinct?
Brilliant, brilliant. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. What's your advice to young entrepreneurs who want to build, grow, scale, exit? What are the things they need to think about? What's your advice?
Well, I've said several times, surrounding yourself with great people is the key to absolutely everything that you do, personally and professionally. So I would say network like crazy. Meet as many people as you can. Have your Rolodex, stay in touch with them. Network with people you actually like. That's a huge lesson that I learned too late, because you're not going to be authentic with the people you don't like. And so go find your tribe. Now, when I have an idea, whether it's opening a restaurant or new tech business, I have a whole bunch of people I can call. Right? There's the casual people that I consider peers. I can call them and say, what do you think of this idea? Are they stupid? Okay. Do you know anybody who might be interested in working on this with me? And then I have a vast group of people who I would consider junior to myself that I can go to and say, you know, like, do you want to quit that job and come work for me? And then a few very, very cherished people that I can learn from, right? But you need to learn from everybody. It's one of the hardest things about getting to the point where I've gotten in my career, that it's hard to now have those mentors, right? I'm old enough now that the mentors I had earlier have passed away or aren't doing business anymore, right? But I'm meeting you now, so now you're going to be one of these people that I can call up and say, hey, Jerome, I'm thinking about doing something stupid. What do you think of this idea, right? And hopefully you can do the same with me. But that's my advice to everybody, is meet as many people as you can. They're the ones who are going to make you successful.
I want to wrap up with looking at the future. I have a lot of, as I said, challenges on this show. We are at the dawn of AI. We have a U.S. election. We have, wars all over the world. It seems like we've just come out of a pandemic. What do you see in the future? And what are the new rules for business?
New rules. I'm reading a book right now where this kid who eventually rises to become an emperor. It's sci-fi, but he realizes one day, he says, I finally figured out the rules for this political game. And the answer is there are no rules. And that's true in business, that's true in politics, it's true in everything. There are no rules. You make your own rules. Decide what it is you want, there's no rules, there's only consequences, right? There's no karma, there's consequences, right? So, you mentioned AI. The advice I would give anybody pitching an idea right now is, will OpenAI be able to destroy you in the next year with its general purpose product, right? And if they will, then please don't do that product, right? And I get pitched ideas all the time where I just think, but OpenAI can do that now, right? Why? So, and they say, well, we're going to market it this certain way. It's like, no, that's not how businesses work. Back to solve a real problem. And you can use OpenAI's interface to solve a real problem. There's a fantastic journaling app I have that just links to OpenAI. But what I want is things like OpenAI is never going to create a dating application. Okay, they're not going to create the AI girlfriend boyfriend. Right? Go do that. That thing's going to make billions of dollars. AIs are going to be people. Okay, there's a massive, wonderful future out there that none of us can predict. But you got to throw a grappling hook onto this massive AI engine and hook onto it and figure out where it's going to take you.
Right. Wow. Well, Sanjay, we covered a lot. We are going to be looking forward to having you back on the show and to talk more. You are a fascinating entrepreneur, leader, inspiring individual, human being, and I want to thank you for being on our show.
Thank you, Jerome. I appreciate it. And I want to see you and all your staff at my restaurant. And we'll go and we'll dance.
Absolutely.
We'll party. Right?
We are. We're going to have a staff event there, and we're looking forward to continuing the relationship.
That's good. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.